Hey guys, tonight we're slipping back in time to a world of velvet gowns, candlelit corridors, and an endless stream of courtly obligations that somehow manage to feel both deeply glamorous and terribly suffocating. You're about to become a Tudor princess, which sounds lovely, until you realize that being royal mostly means being constantly watched, dressed like a walking tapestry, and used like a chess piece by people with swords. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're here, comment below where you're listening from and what time it is there. I love seeing just how far this cozy little time machine travels. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake to the scent of beeswax and damp stone, your eyes fluttering open beneath the thick canopy of an oak-framed bed draped in deep burgundy curtains, stitched with golden Tudor roses. There's a moment, just one, where your mind floats free of memory, hovering in that soft morning fog where anything feels possible. But then, like clockwork, the cold of the room settles in through the cracks of the stained glass windows. The muffled shuffle of slippers approaches, and you remember, you're not just a girl, you're a princess. And not the kind with talking animals or fairy godmothers. No, you're the kind with 30 titles and absolutely no freedom. The door creaks open, deliberately, respectfully, yet somehow still judgmentally, and a trio of attendants sweep in like a small, polite army. They bow, curtsy, and one of them chirps at your father, His Majesty the King, whose moods vary like English weather, wishes you to break your fast in the East Solar today, which is code for someone important is visiting and your presence, decorative and demure, is required. You slide upright and immediately wish you hadn't. The stone floor flashes its chill through your slippers, and the embroidered nightdress does very little against the Tudor morning draft. Your bedchamber, while grand in the storybooks, is more drafty cell than cozy haven. The tapestries lining the walls are thick with age and moth scent, meant to ward off both winter and wandering eyes. Yet somehow they do neither. You glance out the narrow window slit, just in time to catch a glimpse of gray London fog curling across the palace gardens, touching the dew-slick hedges and half-dead roses. There's a fox trotting along the edge of the orchard wall. It's the most freedom you'll see all day. A servant gently pulls back your hair, beginning the process of transforming you from sleepy teenager to glittering symbol of political leverage. This part always takes forever. There are combs, oils, and suspiciously hot irons, and you wonder, not for the first time, if the woman doing your hair secretly resents you. You trade places with her in a heartbeat, if only because she's allowed to yawn without scandal. As your hair is tugged and twisted into something elaborate enough to impress a foreign ambassador, you sit motionless and marvel at the irony. Born into privilege, yet barely allowed to choose your own undergarments. You have 4 layers to put on today. First, the linen chemise, soft but scratchy, then the kirtle, which is just a pretty word for a bodice you can't breathe in. Over that, your outer gown, heavier than it looks, with sleeves that could knock over a candle if you're not careful. And finally, the stiff French hood that makes turning your head too quickly a risky venture. Fashion, in the Tudor court, is basically armor, only less comfortable and more flammable. You've heard rumors that Queen and once caught the edge of her sleeve on fire during a banquet, though historians still wonder if that was poetic license or just a particularly vicious bit of gossip from a disgruntled courtier. By the time you're dressed, it's not even mid-morning and you're exhausted. You haven't even begun the formal day yet. Haven't walked the marble corridors under the gaze of oil-painted ancestors or bowed before half a dozen minor nobles pretending not to plot each other's downfalls. A lady-in-waiting straightens your hem and whispers that the Lord Chancellor's daughter will be joining you for morning prayers. You smile with polite dread. She's sweet in a terribly dull way, and she once insisted that you could pray harder if you imagined the saints had perfume. You secretly named her Saint Lavender after that. The chapel smells of incense and cold pews, and you file in with perfect posture, just another painted figure in a living tableau. The choir begins a low chant, echoing through the vaulted ceiling, and for a brief moment, you drift. You imagine walking outside barefoot in the garden, away from all of this lace and diplomacy, toes sinking into dew-damp grass with no one watching. But then the bishop coughs, and you snap back, reminded that every minute of your life is choreographed. The only dance you're free to improvise is the one you do when trying not to sneeze during silent devotion. After prayers, you're escorted to the East Solar, the room flooded with pale light that makes everyone look a little bit ghostly. The walls are lined with portraits, some so old their eyes seem to follow you, and the fire crackles like it knows secrets. Your father isn't here yet, which means you have a minute to prepare yourself. You've learned how to breathe in ways that don't disrupt your corset, how to smile with just your eyes, how to bow low enough to be respectful, but not desperate. You've also learned that everything, every single action, is noted. There's a clerk whose whole job is remembering who arrived, when, what you wore, how loudly you laughed. Once, you giggled at a joke about sheep, and it sparked a miniature scandal in 3 counties. But today, you're careful. When the foreign envoy enters, you tilt your head just so and murmur a greeting. He smiles with too many teeth and bows so low you can see the thinning hair at his crown. Charming. Probably here to arrange some future alliance that involves you being shipped off to another kingdom like fine porcelain. You sip watered-down wine and nibble bread while pretending not to be studied. This is what being a Tudor princess means, existing more as symbol than self, living in a castle that's equal parts home, prison, and political stage. And yet, as you sit by the fire, the hem of your gown just brushing the cold stone floor, you feel the weight of history settling over your shoulders like another layer of brocade. This world is yours and not yours. It holds you, displays you, protects you from the world while keeping you from truly touching it. You wonder, sometimes, what it would be like to be ordinary, to trip and laugh, to run in the rain, to make a single choice that was truly your own. But those thoughts are dangerous, foolish even. Your life is dictated by lineage, your fate scribbled in a treatise before you ever learn to write your own name. Still, when the servants clear away the dishes and the court prepares to shift into its next carefully orchestrated scene, you allow yourself one small rebellion. You lean back just slightly in your chair, enough to feel the warmth of the fire against your spine, enough to remember that for all the constraints, you are still a person beneath the crown. And tomorrow, you'll find another tiny corner of defiance. Maybe a pause. Maybe a joke no one else catches. Maybe, just maybe, a breath all your own. Morning begins not with a yawn and a stretch, but with the soft but insistent knock of duty at your chamber door, followed by the procession of maids who move more like well-trained stagehands than people, each with a precise role, no improvisation allowed. You, bleary-eyed and still stiff from sleeping under what might as well be a tapestry woven by Hercules himself, are not afforded the luxury of blinking into the day at your own pace. No, you are property of the Tudor crown, and your schedule is about to swallow you whole. The moment your feet touch the floor, cold, always cold, no matter how many rush mats or tapestries your attendants place there, you are plunged into the machinery of the royal morning. And it is a machine, make no mistake, with levers of tradition and pulleys of etiquette. You sit upright, and without even lifting a finger, 2 maids descend to begin disrobing you from the opulent nightgown that you technically never chose. There is something truly humbling about being stripped half-naked while a lady-in-waiting reads you the day's appointments in a voice as soothing as a tax ledger. Today you are to attend morning prayers, of course, followed by a Latin tutorial, A brief embroidery session under the hawk-like supervision of the Duchess of Somerset, who once stabbed herself with a needle and called it character building. And then a musical recital to impress the visiting Bavarian cousins, who historically can't tell a lute from a potato. As this list unfolds, your limbs are being methodically cleaned with rosewater-soaked cloths. Not quite a bath, but enough to keep your royal scent closer to herbal meadow and farther from medieval barnyard. There is a moment during this morning routine that always feels particularly existential. The moment where someone else holds up your underclothes for you to step into, and you realize this is as normal to them as buttoning their own shirt. You're lifted, corseted, and layered in so many fabrics that by the end, you feel less like a girl and more like a haunted wardrobe. Your arms have limited range. Your spine is being asked to do impossible things. And somewhere in the distance, you can hear the chapel bell tolling a warning that you're already 5 minutes late for being perfectly on time. Your hair, which has ideas of its own, is wrangled into a shape deemed appropriate for maidenhood, complete with ribbons, pins, and a level of yanking that could qualify as medieval torture. The finishing touch is the application of a pale powder that gives you the sickly glow of someone who hasn't eaten a vegetable in weeks, which, funny enough, might actually be accurate. By the time you're finally ready to emerge, there's barely a trace left of the sleepy, vulnerable girl who woke up just an hour ago. Instead, the royal mask is in place. Demure, elegant, and deeply uncomfortable. Walking through the corridors is its own performance. Every step is measured, every glance calibrated. Your ladies in waiting form a silent flank around you like bodyguards, though they're mostly just there to whisper reminders about which side to curtsy on and who you're supposed to pretend to like today. The palace is awake now, full of echoing footfalls, the hiss of quills on parchment, and the occasional burst of lute music from some overeager courtier practicing their way into someone's favor. Servants sweep past you with trays, messages, armfuls of dried herbs, and always their heads slightly bowed, as though looking directly at you might trigger a lightning strike. You pass a tapestry depicting some heroic Tudor battle, all horses and gore and triumphant banners, and you wonder for a moment what it would have been like to be born a prince instead, given a sword instead of a needle, expected to lead rather than smile. But that's a dangerous spiral, so you pull your thoughts back in with the same quiet discipline that's been drilled into you since before you could read your own name. At morning prayers, the chapel is lit with flickering candlelight, heavy with incense, and filled with the sound of soft, muttering Latin. Your knees ache as you kneel on the carved stone pew, and your mind tries to stay afloat amidst the ocean of chanting. You spy a cobweb in the corner of the vaulted ceiling, which feels oddly comforting. Proof that even in this perfectly curated world, something wild and uninvited can exist. The bishop drones on about virtue and grace, eyes closed in what might be holiness or boredom. And beside you, Lady Clarissa has clearly fallen asleep with her hands still folded piously in her lap. You feel a small, sharp stab of jealousy, dozing off during Mass. Scandalous, luxurious, heroic. You manage to suppress a smile as you lower your head, but the slight twitch of your mouth does not go unnoticed. One of the older duchesses across the aisle narrows her eyes, and you just know that by noon, the court gossip mill will be turning with tales of your disrespectful grin. After prayers, there's no rest, not even a biscuit. You're led briskly to your studies, which take place in a chamber filled with both books and drafts, and one very tired tutor who insists on speaking Latin even when he drops things. You are expected to recite Cicero with elegance, though he's less impressed with pronunciation and more obsessed with volume. Project like a queen, not a mouse, he shouts with a gentle snarl. You repeat phrases about honor and statecraft while your stomach growls and your corset pinches your ribs like it has a vendetta. You try to concentrate, but your eyes keep drifting to the frosted windows, behind which lies a sun you're rarely allowed to feel on your face. Your only escape is embroidery class, and even that is pushing it, because today you're tasked with stitching the royal crest onto an altar cloth while Duchess Sumshire looms behind you, muttering critiques like, "Your roses look sulky," and "God forbid your husband ever sees this mess." You want to stab the fabric out of protest, but instead, you quietly pull your stitches tighter and imagine her tripping over her own self-importance. Lunchtime arrives like a royal pardon. The hall is loud, full of clinking goblets and chattering courtiers. You're seated at the head of the long oak table, your plate arranged just so, with peacock pie, spiced root vegetables, and bread so crusty you might need a hammer. Meals are social performances, and you are expected to speak precisely 5 times. Once to greet, once to compliment the food, once to inquire about someone's estate, once to make a witty remark, and once to say you're full. Anything more is overeager, anything less is rude. A visiting nobleman from somewhere foggy and northward attempts to engage you in conversation about sheep tax. You nod politely while fantasizing about throwing your goblet at him. He smells vaguely of leather and ambition, and you know, without a doubt, that here his father is angling for your hand in marriage. Everyone always is. You nibble at a slice of tart while your mind wanders to what it must be like to eat in bed, alone, with no one watching. After the meal, it's more of the same: etiquette drills, language practice, posture correction. You're led through a drawing room to make polite conversation with a duchess who once accused her pet cat of sorcery, which is funny in theory, but exhausting in practice. You laugh in all the right places, offer the appropriate admiration for her new slippers, hand-stitched by someone else's sorrow, and make a mental note to never, ever become that particular kind of powerful old woman. By the time the sun has dipped low, staining the palace walls in gold and rust, you are permitted to return to your chamber, but not to rest. No, you must write a letter to your father, thanking him for something vague, and another to your future self, which your governess insists will be a valuable lesson in maturity. You sit at your writing desk, quill in hand, and wonder who this future you is supposed to be. Will she still be playing the same role, or will she finally have found a door that wasn't locked? Evening edges in, but the routine never stops. Your clothes are carefully peeled off you like layers of ceremony, and you are once again wiped down with cloth soaked in lavender water before being wrapped in a sleeping gown too stiff to actually sleep in. As the maids retreat and the fire is stoked for the night, you lie in bed beneath a canopy that looks like it could crush you in a light breeze. Outside, an owl hoots. Inside, you count your breaths and try to remember the last time you laughed loudly enough for someone to notice. Being a Tudor princess, it turns out, is less about diamonds and tiaras and more about performance. About standing in the exact center of the world's most beautiful stage and never being allowed to step off it. And as your eyes grow heavy, as the long shadows stretch across the stone floor and your thoughts begin to blur, you wonder, not for the first time, if any of the queens in the tapestries above your bed ever wished they'd been born invisible. Before the sun has fully climbed above the slate-colored rooftops of the palace, before the scent of baking bread has drifted up from the kitchens, and certainly before you've had even a moment to sit in peace with your thoughts, the day demands that you present yourself not just as a princess, but as an impeccably constructed statue of wealth, lineage, and restrained femininity. And that means getting dressed, or rather, being dressed, because no one in their right mind would voluntarily attempt this process alone. The wardrobe process is less of a routine and more of a sacred ritual, with at least 4 women circling you like solemn bees around the hive, each carrying a piece of your identity folded in silk, stiffened with whalebone, or padded with something that once had feathers. You're already standing in your linen shift, shivering slightly as the morning air snakes its way into the chamber despite the best efforts of thick tapestries and smoldering firewood. A footstool is nudged into place behind you without anyone speaking and you're lifted gently, precisely, into your first layer, the chemise, which is mercifully soft and feels vaguely like an old friend by now. Then comes the farthingale, a stiff, cone-shaped underskirt that transforms your silhouette into the ideal bell shape, beloved by both fashion and ego, and makes sitting in most chairs either impossible or hilarious. One of the ladies tightens it while another begins to fasten your stays, pulling at laces with a grunt that sounds suspiciously like vengeance. The corset, of course, is not designed with your breathing in mind. It is there to remind you and everyone else that a royal woman must be rigid in form and virtue, and preferably not prone to eating more than 3 bites at any given meal. As you're cinched into this architectural marvel of discomfort, you catch a glimpse of yourself in the tall mirror by the hearth. What little of you is visible under the growing mass of garments, and you look, frankly, like a very elegant scarecrow. One who has never done a day's work, but still. The sleeves of your gown today are embroidered with gold thread and lined with miniver fur. They were sewn over the course of 2 months by hands more skilled and likely more patient than your own. The gown itself weighs more than a milk pail and is stiff enough to stand upright without you inside it. Every detail, buttons shaped like Tudor roses, pearls sewn into the bodice, velvet folds cut with geometric precision, is there not for your comfort, but for political theater. Because when you walk into court later, people won't say, "She looked happy," or "She looked clever." They'll say, "She wore the red brocade today," and that will mean something, even if no one remembers what. You shift your weight from one foot to the other as someone tightens the inner lacing of your gown, and you feel the full burden of symbolism settling onto your shoulders. Quite literally, because the sleeves alone feel like they're dragging you into the floor. One maid plucks a stray thread from your collar as if removing a sin, while another places the final layer over you. The stiff, embroidered overgown with a collar so high it brushes your ears when you breathe. Then comes your headdress, a French hood today, less severe than the English gable hood, but still about as comfortable as wearing a bookshelf on your head. Your hair, previously twisted, yanked, and tucked, is pinned beneath the hood in a series of movements that could easily double as medieval origami. A pearl drop is clipped onto your ear, followed by its twin, and then, finally, a delicate golden chain is laid across your collarbone with reverence, as if it's a necklace and not a leash. Somewhere in the middle of all this, someone mentions that it might rain today, and another woman tuts because that means your hem will need to be carried to avoid soaking the bottom layer of the embroidery. Heaven forbid the queen's niece be seen with water-stained silks. And you stand there, arms slightly out, neck gently tilted, blinking into the morning light with the quiet realization that your entire existence, down to the very shoes on your feet, is a carefully curated exhibit meant for viewing, not living. The shoes, by the way, are narrow and pinched, designed to look delicate rather than support actual walking. They're embroidered to match the gown, with tiny golden roses that no one will ever notice. And when you slip them on with effort, you know they'll give you blisters before noon. Once you're finally dressed, after nearly an hour of being turned, buttoned, laced, pulled, powdered, and polished, you no longer feel like a person. You feel like an object of display, a portrait made of flesh, three-dimensional manifestation of someone else's agenda. Moving feels precarious, like every step is an opportunity to fall, and your spine has surrendered to the corset's tyranny. But you smile, just enough to be pleasant, and make your way slowly across the room as your attendants scatter, some to collect your accessories, others to deliver word that you're prepared to be seen. A small part of you rebels, fantasizes about tearing off the corset, running barefoot through the wet grass, or wearing nothing but your linen shift while throwing bread crusts at the geese in the courtyard. But such rebellion is confined to fantasy. Even a misplaced hairpin can result in a lecture about honor, let alone public dishevelment. The weight of the wardrobe, both literal and symbolic, is impossible to forget. One historian later speculated that some noble women required assistance just to sit without snapping a rib, though others argue that was exaggerated. Still, the truth remains. Your fashion is your prison. Your gown is a message to everyone around you. I am virtuous, controlled, and terribly well decorated. As you descend the staircase, each step a creak of wood and caution. You can feel the stairs before you see them. Members of the court loiter in the corridors, their eyes flicking up and down your ensemble like critics at a gallery opening. One whispers something about your sleeve pattern. It might be admiration or passive aggression or both, and frankly, it doesn't matter. What matters is that you look the part, that you resemble what they expect, a poised, silent daughter of power. You catch your reflection in a silver platter on a passing servant's tray, and you hardly recognize yourself. There's no sign of the girl who used to run barefoot through the orchard behind the east wall. No trace of the one who once tripped over a hen and laughed until her stomach ached. Just a polished figure of velvet and steel, gliding down the hall like a chess piece, important but unable to move on her own. As the morning unfolds, you will be complimented on your attire. The ladies will coo over your bodice stitching. The gentlemen will nod approvingly at your father's excellent taste, and someone will inevitably ask whether your seamstress is still living, as if she were some kind of endangered magician. You will thank them all, of course. Smile without teeth. Nod with just the right degree of gratitude and modesty. But deep down, as the pearls dig lightly into your collarbone and your corset prevents you from eating more than a few carefully placed bites at lunch, you'll remember that all of this, the weight, the polish, the aching perfection, isn't meant for you. It's meant for them. You are a gallery of tradition, a vessel of bloodline, and every stitch in your gown is sewn with the understanding that your body is the canvas for your family's ambition. And still, as the afternoon sun filters through the windows and casts dancing shadows on your gown's heavy folds, you do what every Tudor princess learns to do. You endure it. You carry the gown like a queen who doesn't flinch, even if the bodice cuts into your ribs. You walk like you believe the pearls make you invincible. You let them think you adore the rituals, the weight, the image. You let them see what they want. Because under the embroidery, under the bone and velvet and silk, you are still there. Still thinking. Still waiting. Still quietly imagining what it would feel like to be light. You finally make it to breakfast, or rather, the morning performance disguised as breakfast, where silver platters gleam beneath tapestries depicting improbable battle scenes, and everyone seated around the table is there with an agenda. Except, perhaps, the gooseberry jam, which is the only thing that doesn't seem to want anything from you. The long oak table stretches like a polite battlefield across the chamber, and you are carefully ushered to your seat near the head, your chair slightly more ornate than everyone else's. Not because you asked for it, of course, but because everything about your presence must reinforce your status. The air smells faintly of cinnamon, roasted meat, and ambition. Courtiers hover just within hearing range, waiting for the precise moment to make conversation appear accidental, while servants glide past like ghosts, refilling goblets and pretending not to listen. Across from you sits the Earl of something small but significant, whose wig is slightly askew and whose daughter, coincidentally, just reached marriageable age and, also coincidentally, keeps glancing at you with a mixture of awe and terror. You take a small bite of poached pear and immediately regret it. The flavor is divine, but the bite was slightly too large for corset etiquette. And now you must chew with the grace of a duchess and the panic of someone who fears dying of apple-related asphyxiation in front of foreign dignitaries. A clerk reads announcements in a flat monotone, like he's narrating the world's driest novel, and all the while you are expected to nod at the correct intervals, express concern for the harvest in York, and pretend you're not aware of the veiled standoff happening 2 seats down, where 2 minor noblewomen are locked in a silent war of eyebrow-raising and excessive napkin folding. Your father is not present this morning. He rarely is unless something needs to be signed, blessed, or ceremonially glared at, but his absence doesn't reduce the pressure. If anything, it increases it. You are his mirror today. Your poise, your silence, your expressions, each is a reflection of his power. A smile too bright may be interpreted as flirtation. Too little warmth, and you're labeled cold. There is, of course, no in-between that satisfies everyone. As you dab your lips with a linen cloth embroidered with your initials, as if you might forget who you were mid-meal, you notice that Lord Greaves is watching you. Not in a lecherous way, though that wouldn't be surprising, but in the way someone watches a book they want to rewrite. He's likely here to propose an alliance, which is code for handing you off like a valuable painting to hang in his family's gallery. Your plate is filled again before you even signal, and you're given a slice of bread, some soft cheese, and what looks suspiciously like a decorative leaf trying to pass itself off as food. Eating is supposed to be dainty, but also enthusiastic, proof that you are not delicate in a sickly way, but rather in a robust, English rose fashion. You chew, you nod, you listen as a minor cousin of the Queen begins a tale about her falcon learning to bow. Across the table, someone clears their throat with dramatic intent, and suddenly the room tenses. The Spanish ambassador has decided to speak. He smiles like someone who knows too much and begins complimenting the English court's refinement, which is either a genuine remark or a precursor to an insult wrapped in diplomatic ribbon. You are expected to respond, not with words, necessarily. That would be far too forward, but with a knowing smile, a tilt of the head, the kind of expression that suggests grace and intellect and the potential for strategic marriage alliances. You deliver your expression perfectly. Someone nearby exhales in relief. The ambassador bows slightly in acknowledgement, and the moment is filed away in someone's memory as Her Grace's impressive diplomatic restraint, though all you did was smile and not drop your spoon. But here, at this table, every movement is political. Even breakfast, especially breakfast. When you choose the honeyed oat cake over the fruit, you're showing loyalty to the kitchens that favor local ingredients. When you ask about the Duke's newly planted orchard, you're engaging in subtle flattery that strengthens ties to his region, which just so happens to be embroiled in a quiet land dispute with the Queen's cousin's husband. Historians still wonder if these morning meals were deliberate stages for soft power exchanges or just deeply unlucky coincidences of timing. But the truth is, they were both. Everything in your life is both a performance and a possibility. Take the moment when your younger brother's tutor stops by the table to compliment your Latin. That's not about education. That's a test. He's letting everyone within earshot know that you've been deemed clever, and by extension, ready for more responsibility or more marriageability. The distinctions blur. Your jaw aches slightly from the constant smiling, and the corners of your mouth begin to protest under the weight of diplomacy. You shift in your seat, which causes the layers of fabric around your waist to bunch awkwardly, and a servant quickly moves to readjust the fall of your skirts. You thank him with a soft glance. That too is noted. Always gracious, always composed. You imagine, briefly, tossing your fork into the air and yelling, "I'm 16. I'd rather eat cold potatoes in peace than carry the fate of 4 counties on my back before noon." But instead, you sip your watered-down wine and make a polite remark about the weather's effect on apple crops. A dry joke, hidden well enough that only one person at the table catches it. Your cousin Mary, who raises a single eyebrow in quiet approval. Tiny rebellions, hidden in metaphor and food. You are allowed to speak only when addressed or when commenting on something light. You are not permitted to discuss policy, war, religious tension, or taxation, but you are expected to have opinions on tapestries, court fashion, and which saints are most in vogue. One lady begins praising Saint Eustace with such enthusiasm that it borders on romantic poetry. and you wonder if she's confusing him with her fencing instructor. Another claims to have had a dream in which Saint Barbara blessed her with a vision of peace in Scotland, which is interesting considering she's never been farther north than her cousin's manor in Derbyshire. You're asked if you've had any holy dreams lately, and you smile faintly before replying that you once dreamed of eating an entire blackberry pie with no witnesses. A few people chuckle, a few do not. And just like that, you've walked the line again, amusing but not improper, real but not rebellious. Halfway through the meal, a page delivers a folded note to your side. You unfold it beneath the table, careful to keep your face expressionless. It's a reminder. You're expected to attend an audience this afternoon with a visiting Flemish merchant family, which is likely code for someone wants to see if your dowry comes with influence. You fold the note with practiced grace and tuck it into the slit of your sleeve, alongside at least 3 others waiting to be answered. Breakfast, it turns out, is less about nourishment and more about networking. By the time the final course arrives, some soft candied plums and a sliver of almond tart. You're emotionally drained and physically underfed, and yet you must remain glowing and curious and entirely unaffected. Your cheeks ache from the smiling, and your mind feels like a ledger of whispered intentions, veiled compliments, and vague threats disguised as observations. The meal finally ends with a quiet clink of goblets and the rising of chairs. Everyone bows or curtsies again, and you are escorted out with the elegance of a floating cloud, though in truth your feet hurt and you'd give anything to be horizontal. As you leave the hall, you catch the eye of the Earl's daughter again. She gives a tiny, hopeful smile. You nod back, gentle and neutral. Somewhere behind you, voices resume in a low hum, dissecting everything you did, said, wore, and possibly thought. The door closes, and breakfast, like so many things in your life, becomes a performance reviewed in real time by a cast of nobles pretending not to judge you while quietly crafting your destiny over toast and treacle. After breakfast, you're not granted rest or solitude. Instead, you're whisked off by your governess and a pair of ever-hovering ladies-in-waiting, each of whom has memorized your daily schedule with the precision of a military campaign. You're not a girl with free will. You are a schedule, a mission, a walking prototype of what the ideal noble daughter must be. Gracious but not bold, educated but not opinionated, refined but not rigid. You're led into the instruction room, though calling it a room feels disingenuous. It's more like a gilded pressure chamber where femininity is forged in silence, repetition, and endless embroidery. The walls are draped with intricate samplers, examples of ideal stitchwork by former princesses and duchesses, all of whom supposedly enjoyed spending hours threading silk through linen while pretending not to resent the bleeding calluses on their fingers. The room smells like pressed lavender, beeswax, and something less describable, old ambition perhaps. You're greeted by Mistress Clarendon, your needlework instructor, whose face has never once cracked into a genuine smile in your presence. Her voice is clipped, her corset tighter than yours, and her expectations as unforgiving as the wood of the straight-backed chair you're expected to occupy for the next 4 hours. She begins by examining yesterday's embroidery. You've stitched a delicate bird perched atop a vine, but the tension in your thread was uneven, and she points this out not as a critique, but as a moral failing. The bird wobbles, she says, as does your discipline. After embroidery comes music, which you used to enjoy, until it became mandatory. You sit at the virginal, fingers hovering like soldiers about to march into a losing battle. Your music tutor, Monsieur Dupont, smells of pipe smoke and disappointment. He tells you to play the Italian piece again, slower, with feeling. You're not allowed to show frustration, though it simmers beneath your skin. You play. Again, and again. No passion, he mutters. But how can there be, when every note is measured, every expression watched, every mistake a mark against your very worth. You are not learning music to create beauty. You are learning it to perform docility. A princess must never bang the keys, he warns, and you wonder if he's ever had to hold a smile while strangers decide if you're worthy of their son based on your posture while playing a G major chord. After music, there's a brief walk through the gardens, but even this is rehearsed. You do not stroll for pleasure. You walk with poise, step over gravel paths with careful elegance, and nod at gardeners as if you've never tripped in your life. Your governess quizzes you on heraldry while you walk. "What is the sigil of the House of Wessex?" she asks. And when you answer correctly, 3 crowned ravens, she does not praise you. "You'll need to remember," she says, "should you ever be wed to them." Your stomach clenches. Every fact, every lesson, every motion is rooted in the future you have no say in, a marriage you won't choose, to a man you likely won't love, for the benefit of a family who treats your obedience as currency. You're led back inside to practice your curtsies. Again, and again, and again. Lower, they say. Not too low. Smile, but softly. No thief. Arms fluid, not stiff. You curtsy to invisible dukes, to imagined kings, to the ghost of expectations past. The floorboards creak in protest, or maybe it's your knees. You are then taken to a room with your rhetoric tutor, Lady Gifford, who once debated a bishop into tears and now spends her days teaching you how to say nothing in 10 elegant sentences. You must learn the art of indirect defiance, she says. How to sound agreeable while refusing. How to disagree without consequence. How to command without appearing to. She makes you recite conversation patterns for greeting foreign ladies of court. Be warm, but not familiar. Curious, but not prying. Charming, but never flirtatious. You ask her what happens if you get it wrong. She does not answer. She only raises a single eyebrow and says, "You won't, because you can't. You can't get it wrong." There are no second chances in a world where your mistakes are remembered longer than your virtues. You're taught how to pour tea, how to accept gifts without seeming greedy, how to politely refuse a compliment, how to bow your head while remaining superior, and how to leave a room without making a sound, as if you were never there at all. The day continues with Latin translation, scriptures, mostly, and then a lesson in the Psalms, not for religious enlightenment, but because you must be fluent in sacred speech. Piety is power, the chaplain says, especially when displayed with sincerity. You're not sure what true sincerity feels like anymore. You spent so long pretending to feel the correct things at the correct times that your real feelings are beginning to wither like forgotten roses in a too tight bouquet. Your tutor hands you a parchment with a Latin prayer and asks you to translate it aloud, softly, like a supplication. You do. She nods. You did well. But still no praise. Praise is withheld because too much of it breeds pride, and pride is not a virtue you're allowed. You're granted 15 minutes for silent reflection. You sit by a tall stained glass window, the sun bleeding through into colored shadows on the floor, and you try to let your mind rest. But even then, you are not free. Your thoughts turn to strategy. Who spoke to you at breakfast, what they might want, whether your posture was too rigid, whether you curtsied deep enough to the countess who's rumored to hate your family. Even silence is political. Even stillness is preparation. By late afternoon, you're brought to the seamstresses, where bolts of imported fabric are unfurled like royal decrees, and your body is measured not just in inches, but in status. Every stitch that will go into your new gown is a stitch of propaganda. The lace imported from Venice says, "We can afford foreign luxury." The pearl buttons say, "She is rare and valuable." The cut of the bodice says, "She is modest but beautiful." You are posed, turned, pinned, examined, and draped like a mannequin made of royal blood and silent endurance. A lady's maid whispers about which colors are in fashion in Paris, and a younger maid confesses she thinks you'd look radiant in violet. You smile gently, because that's what's expected, though you'd rather wear gray and vanish into the walls. You remember the last time you requested something, a small brooch shaped like a swan, and how it vanished from your jewelry box within a week because it wasn't appropriate for some of your station. You no longer make requests. You accept what is given, and you wear it with grace, even when it itches or pinches or feels like it belongs to someone else entirely. Your body is a canvas, your clothing the brushstroke, and you are the frame, ornate, beautiful, and nailed firmly to the wall. As evening approaches, your lessons wind down, and you are led to your chambers to prepare for the evening's formal appearance in the drawing room. But before that, a final review. Your governess quizzes you on your family's lineage, back 7 generations. Then she drills you on the names of every titled guest currently visiting court. You answer correctly, all of them. She doesn't smile, but she does allow you a nod of permission to rise. You sit at your vanity while your ladies prepare your hair, brushing, curling, weaving in delicate ribbons and pins shaped like lilies. You stare into the mirror, but barely recognize the girl reflected there. She is elegant, composed, noble. She is not you. She is the result of 1,000 lessons in lace and obedience. She does not fidget. She does not cry. She does not complain. She is perfect, and she is exhausted. Evening falls not with relaxation, but with ritual, and you are summoned, not asked, to participate in the nightly ceremony of visibility, the drawing room gathering. You've been powdered, perfumed, pinned into a gown that cost more than most subjects will earn in a year, and now it is time to become the object they paid for. You do not simply enter the room, you arrive. 2 pages open the gilded double doors as if unveiling a masterpiece, and you walk in exactly as trained, slow, graceful steps, hands lightly resting before you, chin lifted just enough to appear confident but never arrogant. Your entrance is rehearsed down to the angle of your gaze. You make eye contact, but only fleetingly. You smile, but never broadly. Your heartbeat sounds like a drum beneath your corset, not from nerves, but from the sheer tension of what this parade means. This is not leisure. This is politics, theater, and surveillance all at once. Courtiers line the room like observers at an auction, noting everything about you. The new embroidery pattern on your sleeve, the slight change in hairstyle, the curve of your shoulders. You are a conversation piece wrapped in satin, and every single thing you say or do tonight will be analyzed in whispered huddles by breakfast tomorrow. You begin the circuit, the princess's parade. You stop to curtsy to the Countess of Arlingford, who has always eyed you with a hint of disdain. Her son once courted your cousin, and it didn't end well. You exchange safe pleasantries, the weather, the roses, the latest ball in Essex. Then she asks, with sharp sweetness, "Do you plan to visit your aunt in the north soon?" It's a trap, of course. Your aunt is entangled in scandal, and mentioning her might imply allegiance or disapproval. So you give the safe answer, neutral but warm. "If Her Majesty permits it, I would love to enjoy the countryside this season." She smiles like a cat that didn't catch the mouse but enjoyed the chase anyway. You excuse yourself with a perfect pivot and move to the Viscount of Weybridge, who wants to talk about falconry. You pretend to be interested in birds. You nod at the right places, laugh lightly when he makes a joke about hawks being like courtiers. They circle the throne, don't they? And you offer no opinion because offering one would mean committing to a perspective, and perspectives are dangerous when you're still considered tradable. You continue moving through the room. A minor duke's daughter compares gowns with you. A baroness insists you try a new French cordial, and you sip it though it tastes like flowers drowned in alcohol. The king's advisor asks after your Latin lessons. You answer in a complete sentence in Latin. He looks impressed. You wonder if he's thinking you might be suitable for the Duke of Norchester, his nephew. Everyone is thinking of you as a wife, a pawn, a potential piece on their family chessboard. No one asks what you enjoy. No one ever has. You pause near the marble fireplace, pretending to admire the carved lions above it, giving your feet a moment's reprieve. But your governess gives you a look from across the room. Move. Be gracious. Be charming. The parade cannot stall. You move to a group of young noblewomen, each one expertly trained like you, each one secretly exhausted. You exchange gossip, most of it harmless. You listen to Lady Evangeline recount her journey through stormy weather to get to the palace. You comment on the bravery of her carriage driver. You laugh when Lady Sybil jokes about nearly losing a shoe in the palace garden. But no one speaks freely. Not really. Every word is guarded, gilded in court etiquette. You are all actresses in a play no one dares rewrite. Eventually, the queen enters the room and everything freezes. Everyone bows or curtsies in unison. She glides past like a vision in emerald, her own face a perfect mask of practiced serenity. She speaks to a few favored guests. You are not among them tonight. Relief washes over you. Attention from the queen is both an honor and a burden. It means more eyes, more expectations, more ways to fail. Later, the music begins, violins a soft harpsichord, and couples begin to dance. You do not dance unless invited. That's the rule. And when the Duke of Harling approaches you, you cannot refuse. He is older, twice your age, but unmarried and wealthy, and that makes him dangerous in this space. You accept his offer hand. He leads you to the center of the ballroom, and you move through the steps of the pavane with robotic grace. His grip is too firm, his smile too tight. Your father and I spoke earlier, he murmurs. He's proud of you. Your stomach knots. That's not a compliment. That's a warning. You smile, nod, and make a comment about the music. He does not press further, but the message has been delivered. Your freedom has never truly belonged to you, but tonight it feels more fragile than ever. The dance ends. You curtsy. He bows. You walk away, wondering if everyone just witnessed a negotiation in disguise. The rest of the evening is more of the same. Conversations laced with strategy, laughter that is half-performed, smiles that mask fatigue. Occasionally, a servant offers refreshments, spiced wine, honey cakes, sugared almonds, but you take only a little. A princess must not appear greedy. One too many sweets, and you're spoiled. Too little, and you're fragile. You maintain the perfect balance. Eventually, the queen retires, and that signals the slow dissolution of the gathering. You're allowed to leave. You make your exit with 3 other young ladies, all of you gliding like swans back through the palace corridors. The moment you're out of earshot, someone whispers, "Did you see Lord Wexley's shoes?" And the group explodes into soft giggles. For the first time in hours, you feel something close to real camaraderie. But it doesn't last. You reach your chambers. Your maids remove your jewelry, unpin your hair, peel away the layers of silk and lace that wrapped you like a second, stifling skin. You're left in your night shift, finally able to exhale, but even then, you're not alone. Your governess arrives to give you a final debrief. You were acceptable, she says. But next time, don't interrupt Lady Halbridge. She noticed. You nod. Of course she did. Everyone notices everything. Always. As you sink into the grand, canopied bed, the silence of the palace at night is both comforting and cruel. It gives you space to think, but thinking leads to dreaming, and dreaming leads to wanting, and wanting is dangerous. You stare at the carved ceiling above you and wonder what your life would be like if you weren't born to parade, to be paraded, to perform the role of the perfect princess each night like clockwork. You long for a night where your smile isn't measured, your gown isn't judged, your words aren't weapons or walls. But such nights don't exist. Not here. Not for you. Not in a world where princesses are seen, assessed, paraded, and placed like figurines on a diplomatic shelf. You close your eyes, not to sleep, but to shut it all out. Tomorrow, it will begin again. The protocol, the posturing, the performance. The parade never ends. You are 16, maybe 17, and though your body is not your own, your future even less so. You're now the hottest commodity on the palace floor, a blooming flower in the ever-churning, cold-hearted machinery of aristocratic matchmaking, otherwise known as the marriage market. No, it's not a literal market, though it may as well be, for the way your virtues, bloodline, fertility, dowry, and docility are silently auctioned off in conversations cloaked in compliments. From the moment you're of age, your life is no longer yours. It belongs to strategy, alliances, treaties disguised as tea parties, and hands you've never held but must soon promise to clutch until death. The gowns get heavier, the expectations tighter, and the suitors, oh, the suitors, begin parading through your life like buyers inspecting livestock. You sit stiff-backed in gilded chairs across from earls and dukes and barons, and even foreign princes who speak with thick accents and judge you with silent eyes. One wants a wife who will bear 6 sons. Another wants one who speaks French and can embroider roses. Another simply wants a docile face beside him at state dinners. You smile. You nod. You ask about their estates, their horses, their policies. You pretend to care about their hobbies while suppressing the scream inside you that asks, "What about what I want?" But no one's listening. They're all just talking. Your parents behind velvet curtains, your governess whispering with the chancellor, your royal matchmaker making checklists of names and titles and connections, none of which consider your heart. Your portrait is painted and sent to foreign courts, your features softened, your eyes brightened, your waist cinched by the stroke of a brush, not by reality. You are packaged like a gift, shipped out across continents to be unwrapped and judged by kings and queens you've never met. Your letters are dictated, your responses to suitors filtered through courtiers. When a proposal finally comes, let's say from the son of a viscount from a powerful maritime region, you don't hear about it first. Your father does, then your mother, then your governess. And by the time they sit you down and say, it's a strong match, you've already lost the ability to protest. Because a strong match doesn't mean love, or even like. It means power, land, influence, trade agreements, an advantageous merging of family crests. If you dare to say you're unsure, they remind you of your duty. They remind you how many others would kill for your position. You're told marriage is not about affection, it's about function. Love can come later. They say, like love is a visitor that knocks politely after your vows are sealed and your womb is full. Then the preparations begin. You're fitted with bridal gowns that weigh more than your doubts, stitched by women who don't meet your gaze. You're taught your fiancé's family's customs. You are forced to memorize his favorite foods, his mother's favorite flowers, his father's military accolades. You are told which of his opinions you must publicly support and which you must tactfully avoid. You are warned not to outshine him. Make him feel important. Your governess whispers, as if your entire value rests in how well you disappear behind his ambitions. Meanwhile, the palace buzzes with excitement. There will be a wedding. There will be a celebration. There will be guests and jewels and fireworks and parades. But no one speaks of what follows: the silent rooms, the foreign halls, the nights where your new husband may not even return to your bed, or worse, may come to it full of wine and expectation and not an ounce of kindness. You do not get to ask for love. You do not get to ask for anything. Your vows are just another script, to honor and obey. They drill those words into your bones until your spine bends under their weight. And heaven help you if you're deemed unsuitable, if your suitors vanish, or if your bloodline is questioned, or if rumors, those ever-hovering whispers, begin to circle your name. You become a bargaining chip no one wants to cash in. Suddenly, The same court that once praised your grace now mutters about your failures. Why isn't she married yet? Did you hear about that broken engagement? They say she's too opinionated. The walls that once protected you begin to close in. You are given fewer invitations, less attention. You are paraded less and ignored more. You see the other girls, your childhood friends, married off, smiling tight-lipped in their ivory gowns, each one another door closing behind you. You begin to panic. What happens if you never marry? What happens if the matchmakers deem you unsalvageable? Will you be sent to a convent? Married off to a second cousin in disgrace? Forced to care for aging relatives in drafty castles far from court? You watch your window of value narrow, year by year, and the realization sets in like a chill. Your worth is measured not by who you are, but by who will take you. Sometimes, late at night, you dream of escape. Of a tiny cottage far from palace walls, where no one knows your name and you can walk barefoot through meadows and fall in love with someone because of their laugh, not their lineage. But it's just that, a dream. In the real world, you're waking up early to rehearse your engagement announcement, to pose for official sketches, to learn how to greet the ambassadors from your future husband's country. You are handed a list of expectations. Bear heirs, manage the estate, avoid scandal, support your husband, stay beautiful. You stare at the list and wonder how you're supposed to fit your entire existence into someone else's plan. But no one asks how you feel. They only ask if the ring fits. And when it does, you smile like the good princess you've been trained to be, even as your heart shatters quietly inside your chest like a chandelier no one noticed falling. Every breath you take inside the palace is monitored, measured, and mined for meaning. Welcome to court life, a glittering prison lined with silk and suspicion, where your smile must be calculated, your tears hidden, and every inch of your existence presented as perfection under the merciless gaze of nobles, advisors, servants, and shadows. From the moment you awaken, you are not alone. Your maid enters before the sun crests the horizon. The guards nod as you pass. Even their silence is loaded with judgment. And from that second on, you are on stage, performing the role of the ideal royal. There is no privacy. Every glance you exchange, every pause in your step, every shift in your voice could spark a rumor. One overheard conversation might ignite scandal. One misplaced gesture might make or break an alliance. In this place, trust is currency, and almost no one can afford it. You quickly learn that behind every smile is a motive, behind every compliment a calculation, and that no one truly sees you as human. You are a symbol, a spectacle, a possession, and they watch, always watch, as if waiting for a crack in your mask, a slip of your tongue, something they can twist into gossip, power, or punishment. Court is not a place of leisure. It is a battlefield disguised as a ballroom, and you're always walking the knife's edge between grace and disgrace. Even your friendships feel rehearsed, curated for optics more than affection. That girl who sits beside you during embroidery lessons? Her father is lobbying for a trade agreement. The boy who sends you poems? His mother wants a court appointment. The queen who kisses your forehead with syrupy affection in public may dismiss your very existence behind closed doors. You learn to laugh at jokes you don't find funny, to nod at conversations you're not part of, to master the art of appearing engaged while detaching completely. Everyone is watching, so you must never falter. Your posture must remain flawless, even when your corset steals your breath. Your expressions must remain neutral, even when whispers about your weight, your womb, or your worth drift past like poison perfume. And the whispers never stop. They slither through the corridors like smoke, curling beneath doors and around corners, infecting even the air you breathe. They say you're too proud. They say you're too soft, too quiet, too loud. They dissect you like a creature in a jar, and no matter how perfectly you perform, you're always one misstep away from humiliation. The court thrives on performance. Masquerade balls, state dinners, diplomatic pageantry, all glittering distractions that double as surveillance traps. At these events, you're adorned like a doll, smiling through hours of introductions, dancing with suitors you barely know, exchanging pleasantries while your mind screams to run. Every move is watched, every interaction dissected. If you speak too freely, you're labeled improper. Too softly, and you're dull. If you smile too widely, you're flirtatious. Too little, and you're cold. It is a game of impossible rules, and you're always losing, even when you're winning. You begin to censor your thoughts before they even form, terrified that the wrong word will be weaponized. The courtiers are like vultures in velvet, circling, waiting. They drink tea with blades hidden in their sleeves, ready to stab you in the back while kissing your cheeks. They pass judgment with a glance. They forge alliances in shadows. And when you're not useful anymore, when your beauty fades, your alliances shift, or your relevance wanes, they discard you without a second thought. One day you are the rising star, the next a ghost in silk, ignored in halls where you once sparkled. Even within your own family, eyes lurk in every corner. Your younger siblings may be pawns just like you, but that doesn't mean they're allies. Perhaps your brother seeks to curry favor by mocking your missteps. Perhaps your cousin hopes to inherit your titles and sows doubt about your suitability. You dine together beneath golden chandeliers, while keeping your knives metaphorically sharpened beneath the table. And don't even think about rebellion, not even a small one. You once skipped a state breakfast claiming illness, and it spiraled into 3 separate rumors: that you were pregnant, that you were plotting escape, and that you had taken a lover from the servant class. All false, all dangerous. Even the act of reading a banned book or walking alone in the gardens for too long can spark suspicion. And if you're caught crying, someone will ask, not out of concern but curiosity. No one wants to comfort you. They just want the story. Because stories are the true currency here, and the juicier, the better. There's always someone eavesdropping, always someone documenting your pain for entertainment or leverage. You begin to feel as though the palace walls themselves have eyes, as though even your reflection might betray you. And yet, you're expected to be grateful, to beam with joy during charity appearances, to praise the kingdom's virtues at every opportunity, to represent perfection while drowning silently inside. You are expected to be a symbol of elegance and obedience while your own desires wither, unspoken and unfulfilled. You must never age, never falter, never want. And when you do, when you ache to scream or cry or run into the woods and never look back, you must smile instead. You must say thank you. You must remain composed. After all, what does a princess have to be sad about? You have gold, gowns, gardens, and guards. But not freedom. Never freedom. Your world may be grand, but it's also a gilded fishbowl, and the watchers never blink. You can't even stumble without headlines erupting. You once laughed too loudly at a banquet and were called undignified. You once declined to dance and were labeled spoiled. No gesture is yours alone. Everything becomes part of the court's endless narrative, twisted beyond your control. Eventually, you begin to vanish into the role itself. You become less a person, more performance. You forget how to cry without wondering who's watching. You forget how to want without fearing the consequences. You forget who you were before the gowns, before the scrutiny, before the duty. Was there ever a version of you that wasn't curated? Was there ever a thought that didn't feel rehearsed? You no longer know. You've learned to breathe behind a mask, to walk with poise even when your knees shake, to dance the court's deadly waltz with a grace that feels less like triumph and more like surrender. You become a living portrait, beautiful, poised, hollow. And though your days are filled with laughter and light and music, none of it touches you. Because here, behind the palace walls, you are never alone, but always lonely, always performing, always watched. In the end, court life isn't about ruling or revelry. It's about surviving. And in this spectacle of surveillance, survival means becoming what they want, even if it means losing yourself in the process. Beneath the polished floors and behind the damask curtains of the palace, far from the opulent chambers of royalty, lies a parallel world, one of whispers, rushing footsteps, and eyes that see everything. The servants' wings, a hidden kingdom within the kingdom, where secrets fester like mold in the stonework and no whispered confession goes unheard. To most nobles, servants are furniture with hands, silent, invisible, obedient. But that blindness is their greatest mistake, because within these narrow corridors and cramped quarters lives the true lifeblood of the palace. The watchers, the whisperers, the quiet orchestrators of royal chaos. Servants know when the queen weeps in her sleep, when the prince slips out past midnight, when the princess leaves letters beneath her pillow only to have them mysteriously vanish. They know who truly runs the court, and it's not the king. It's the cook who hears everything, the stable boy who ferries notes without names, the lady's maid who listens at keyholes and locks lips tight around deadly truths. These halls may not gleam with gold, but they pulse with knowledge, and that knowledge is power. Quiet, patient, corrosive power that could ruin legacies with a single, strategically whispered word. There are rumors, of course, stories passed from one chambermaid to another, exchanged over laundry piles and hushed over shared scraps of bread, that someone is keeping a ledger of every sin committed by those in silk. The secret affairs, the stolen coins, the deadly mixture slipped into cups of tea. Whether the ledger exists is uncertain, but the fear of it does, and that fear governs behavior as much as any royal decree. In this world below the world, hierarchy reigns, but it's measured in secrets, not titles. The old butler who's been in service for 40 years wields more power than most barons. Not because of what he owns, but because of what he knows. The scullery maid who was caught where she shouldn't have been, she didn't get dismissed. She was promoted quietly, suspiciously, placed somewhere closer to the royal bedrooms. Everyone knows she saw something, and everyone wonders what price she was paid to keep her silence. Even the walls down here feel like they're listening. The corridors are narrow, always damp, always echoing. Laughter is rare, and when it does bubble up, it's nervous, strained, like a leak in a pipe about to burst. You can smell the tension, bitter and metallic, like burnt sugar or old blood. There's a code among the staff, an unspoken understanding. Protect each other, but protect yourselves more. If you hear something dangerous, you forget it, unless remembering could buy your freedom or save your life. Trust is rarer than warmth. There are alliances, yes, but they shift like candlelight, flickering from favor to betrayal in an instant. Today's confidant is tomorrow's accuser. And when punishment comes, it is silent and swift. A kitchen boy goes missing. A seamstress falls down the stairs. A maid is transferred to another estate, never to be seen again. No one asks questions. Asking is dangerous. Yet within the perilous walls of the servant quarters, there's also a strange, feral kind of freedom. Because when you are invisible, you can move unseen. You can slip into locked rooms, handle letters before they're sealed, replace medicines with poisons, or simply listen to the truths others try to bury beneath perfume and etiquette. And some servants don't just observe, they orchestrate. They turn whispers into weapons. They sell secrets to rival courts. They manipulate noble marriages. They pass information to rebels in exchange for a promise, a coin, a future. Some say there's an entire shadow court down here, a mockery of the royal hierarchy, complete with its own queen of gossip, dukes of discipline, and a prince of punishment who handles anyone who gets too curious. Whether these figures are real or metaphorical, No one knows. What is known is that the servants' wings have rules, and breaking them has consequences. For every noble who believes the palace is theirs to command, there are 5 servants who've seen that same noble sobbing, bleeding, or pleading in the dark. And those servants remember, always, you're not supposed to venture into this world. Not really. Royals don't belong here. But sometimes curiosity burns hotter than caution. Maybe you followed your maid one night, barefoot and breathless, trailing behind her lantern light through narrow halls you never knew existed. Maybe you wanted to see the real palace, the palace beneath the palace. What you find is something almost magical in its danger. Candlelit rooms crowded with steaming pots, scraps of music from the baker's boy's whistle, a mother nursing her child in a dusty corner as she hums a lullaby in a language you don't recognize. But beneath the surface warmth, there's a crackle of risk. Eyes that flick toward you and quickly away, as if your presence alone could bring ruin. You realize then that this isn't just a place, it's a power system, and you are trespassing. Even if you say nothing, your very presence is a threat. Because in a place where invisibility is safety, being seen by royalty is exposure. If you speak of what you've witnessed, you could spark a fire. If you stay silent, you become complicit in secrets you do not understand. But it's too late. You've seen things, heard things. You know the king's valet meets a stranger in the orchard every Thursday. You know the queen's favorite maid has a scar shaped like a key behind her ear, and that she always disappears the night before someone falls from favor. You know that the food taster swaps her samples with the dog's bowl when she's unsure about the stew. You know too much, and the servants know you know. Suddenly, your tea tastes a little off. Your gowns are stitched a little tighter, just enough to cause discomfort. The maid who used to greet you with a curtsy now keeps her eyes on the floor. You feel a draft in your room where there was none before, and you start to wonder, who really controls the palace? You sleep lighter. You start checking your shoes for glass, your combs for hairline cracks, your bath for shadows that linger too long. The true danger of secrets is not in keeping them. It's in being known as someone who holds them. You carry that weight now, and down in the servants' quarters, they never forget. Sometimes late at night, you imagine the palace as a great living thing. The nobles are its glittering skin, visible and admired. But the servants? They are the nerves, the blood, the bones. They know every weakness, every fracture, and they are patient. If they ever rose up, not with weapons, but with words, there would be no kingdom left. A single whisper, a misplaced note, a confession repeated in the wrong year, and everything would collapse. You don't know if they will, but the threat is always there, humming beneath the surface like an unsprung trap. You think of the maid who disappeared after she told you something she shouldn't have. You wonder if she fled or if she was silenced. You wonder if you're next. Because once the servants know you've walked among them, even once, you are marked, not as one of them, but as someone who might talk. And in this palace, where power hides in the shadows and danger wears a smile, being noticed by the wrong person, even a servant can be a death sentence. So now, when you glide down the grand staircase in your embroidered gown, you keep your head high, your smile soft, but your eyes flicker. You see the footman who looked away too quickly, the maid who always lingers a second too long, the butler whose expression never changes, but whose presence always feels like a warning. You realize that you live in 2 worlds now, one above the marble floors, filled with performance and pageantry, and one below, where every truth you hide is already known, and every lie you tell is a thread in the servant's web. And that web, woven tight and quiet, may one day decide whether you rise or fall. Because in the servant's wings, nothing is ever forgotten, and no one is ever truly safe. In a palace where every breath is monitored, every step echoed through corridors of judgment, and every glance dissected for hidden meaning. The human spirit claws desperately for even the smallest taste of freedom. An ember of joy, a flicker of self, a breath of forbidden fun. Royal life, for all its shimmering gowns and crystalline chandeliers, is a slow suffocation of spontaneity. And yet, amid the rigid schedules, ceremonial stiffness, and endless parade of expectations, there exist moments, brief, fragile, electrifying, where rebellion thrives not through grand revolts or scandalous affairs, but through the tiniest acts of defiance that remind you that you're still alive. These aren't the kind of rebellions that threaten thrones or topple empires. No, they're quieter, subtler, more human. A princess sneaking out of a ball to race barefoot through the garden maze, shrieking laughter swallowed by moonlight. A bored duke's daughter stealing candied plums from the kitchen and bribing a footman to say nothing. A young prince hiding sloppily scrawled poetry inside the spines of courtly instruction manuals. Each one is a small, deliberate act of resistance against a life of surveillance, where even joy feels choreographed. To live in a palace is to be watched, measured, expected to perform a version of yourself that matches the tapestry, not the messy, aching truth inside your skin. So these tiny rebellions, these glittering pockets of mischief, become sacred, rituals of sanity for those trapped inside gilded cages. It's not just the royals who rebel. The servants, too, find their stolen seconds of freedom. A cook who secretly adds extra cinnamon to the queen's cake even though she's forbidden spice. A stable hand who sings love songs to the horses when he thinks no one's listening. A scullery maid who hides worn romance novels beneath her bucket and reads them by slivered moonlight through a cracked window. These are not revolutionary acts by any means, but in a world where obedience is oxygen, they're subversive in their softness. The palace is designed to crush these moments, to eliminate choice, surprise, and self. But they happen anyway. They always have. Even the most well-behaved princess has a story of sneaking past her nanny to climb a tree in her petticoat. Even the most feared noble has laughed so hard they snorted during a feast and had to stifle it behind a goblet. These things are remembered in secret, treasured like stolen pearls hidden in mattress seams. It's not that these people don't know the consequences. Oh, they do. They know that even a giggle in the wrong hallway could spark gossip, that a single outburst could brand them unruly, unstable, unsuitable for alliance. But they do it anyway, because life without laughter, without color, without a little wildness, is worse than exile. It is erasure. Some acts of rebellion are more dangerous. A forbidden book passed beneath a table. A kiss behind a curtain with someone not of noble blood. A runaway attempt that ends at the palace gates with tears, pleading, and silent punishment. These are the rebellions that hover at the edge of ruin, and yet they happen again and again, because for some, the price of being good is just too high. And sometimes, the rebels are not young and reckless, but old and quiet, like the Dowager Duchess who refuses to wear mourning black after her husband's death because she never loved him, or the aging court painter who hides satirical faces in the background of official portraits. These are rebellions of memory, of defiance rooted in years of playing the game and choosing, at last, to stop. And then there are the whispered networks, groups of young nobles who sneak in each other's rooms at night to share stories, secrets, songs that were banned in the last purge of royal decency. They don't speak of revolution, not openly, but they speak of feelings, of anger, of desire, of loneliness. And that is rebellion, too, because it names the very things the court pretends do not exist. Not all rebellion is joyful. Some of it is born of pain, of pressure, of needing to scream when silence is demanded. The girl who carves words into her desk with a hairpin because no one lets her speak. The boy who lets his boots grow dirty, knowing it will shame his mother, but feeling oddly powerful when she winces. The noble who skips prayers not because they don't believe, but because it's the only time they can sit alone with their thoughts. These rebellions are not games. They are survival strategies, coping mechanisms. Tiny rebellions can save a life. They can make a cage feel less suffocating. They can remind a person they are still more than what the titles demand. And that's why they are dangerous. Not because they challenge the structure, but because they preserve the self inside it. These acts are rarely spoken of in the light. You won't hear a duchess brag about how she snuck off to watch fireflies last night, or see a prince admit he danced to a street tune in his bathrobe when he thought no one was looking. But you'll catch the glances, the smirks, the shared looks across the ballroom that say, "I know what you did, and I've done it too." It's a silent camaraderie among the stifled, the watched, the expected. And in those moments, even enemies become kin, bound by the shared knowledge that behind the masks, they are still human, still messy, still rebellious. And those rebellions, while small, accumulate like raindrops on stone, harmless at first, but capable, over time, of reshaping even the most immovable walls. And yet, rebellion does not always end well. For every secret smile, there is a scandal waiting to explode. The letter intercepted, the servant caught, the noble exiled. You never know which act will be the one that crosses the invisible line. One day you're sneaking sweets. The next, you're standing before a tribunal explaining why you were seen with someone you shouldn't have been, doing something the law has no name for, but society abhors. But even so, people keep rebelling. Because even when the cost is high, the reward, those brief seconds of being real, being free, is worth it. Some rebellions grow bolder with time. A young lady once known for her wild laughter becomes a patron of underground music. A quiet prince funds a secret school for commoners. A jester's jokes start landing too close to truth, and people laugh just a little too hard, a little too knowingly. The court pretends not to notice. For now, if you were born into this world, your very breath was a transaction, your smile a performance. But through tiny rebellions, you begin to reclaim something sacred. Not power, not yet, but agency. Identity. Echoes of who you might have been in a world with fewer rules. And maybe that's why the palace fears rebellion in any form, no matter how small. Because it is a reminder that they have not broken you. Not fully. Not yet. That despite the endless etiquette lessons, the corsets and codes and ceremonial bows, there is still a pulse beneath the surface. Beating, stubborn, loud. A pulse that dares to laugh, to love, to live imperfectly. And as long as that pulse exists, the court will never truly be in control. It may dominate your days, script your movements, curate your future. But it cannot own your joy. Not entirely. That joy is yours. That mischief, that spark, that moment of stolen laughter beneath the moon, that's where the real you lives. And that is something no throne can ever hold. In a world where alliances are inked with wedding rings and kingdoms shift with the flutter of a fan, the suitor parade is not just a rite of passage for royalty. It is a blood sport wrapped in silk and politeness, a spectacle of curated charm, predatory courtship, and barely concealed ambition. From a moment a royal comes of age, they're no longer seen as simply a person, but as a prize, coveted, calculated, and stalked like prey beneath the golden chandeliers of courtship. The royal menagerie of suitors comes in all varieties. The arrogant duke with a jaw like chiseled marble and a heart as cold. The painfully awkward nobleman who spills wine on his sleeve while proposing trade negotiations as pillow talk. The brooding foreign prince whose smoldering stare is more impressive than his grasp of your language. And the terrifyingly perfect heir whose smile masks an ego large enough to rival the palace dome. Each suitor brings a gift, Jewels, poetry, rare animals, promises of land and loyalty. But what they're truly offering is themselves as a solution to a political equation. Love, if it exists at all, is a secondary factor. What matters is lineage, leverage, and legacy. The ballrooms become battlefields. Every dance is a negotiation. Every laugh is strategic. And you, the royal target, are expected to smile through it all, flutter your lashes, and choose the fate of nations with a nod of your bejeweled head. Behind the silk fans and flirtations lies a tense undercurrent of power. Marrying well could prevent war, strengthen treaties, or expand influence. But choose poorly, and you risk weakening your house, alienating allies, or, worse, inciting scandal. And so, every interaction is laced with expectation. Suitors don't just court you, they audition for a role in your life story, rewriting it in real time with their intentions. Some try to charm through wit, weaving clever wordplay that flirts without offending. Others weaponize tradition, performing grand gestures like riding horseback into the palace courtyard or quoting epic love poems they likely had ghostwritten. There are the quiet contenders, too. The ones who send books with marginal notes, or simply sit beside you in the garden without speaking, hoping silence will make them stand out in a cacophony of noise. And then there are the dangerous ones. The suitors who smile too sweetly, ask too many questions, and seem to know your weaknesses better than your friends. These are the ones who study you like a map, seeking cracks in your resolve, calculating how best to wear down your resistance until yes becomes inevitable. You learn quickly that being courted is less about being adored and more about being assessed, appraised, and acquired. But amidst the parade of peacocks strutting in their best uniforms and family crests, you begin to spot the game beneath the glamour. The fathers lurking in the background, whispering tactics into their sons' ears. The mothers who offer thinly veiled bribes in the form of priceless heirlooms. The emissaries who shadow your steps, coincidentally appearing wherever you might be with fresh flowers and subtle threats. You're not just choosing a partner, you're navigating a minefield of ambition. And it's exhausting. Every day brings a new face, a new bouquet, a new obligation to smile and not scream. You memorize names, titles, ancestral achievements, and rivalries you never asked to be a part of. You're complimented on things you had no control over. Your lineage, your skin tone, your delicate ankles, as though you were a prize mare at auction. The walls of your private chambers overflow with love letters, many of them identical in tone, each promising eternal devotion after a single conversation and a shared dance. You begin to realize that the more grand the promise, the less real the connection. That somewhere between the stilted serenades and the rehearsed confessions, the idea of authentic love has withered beneath the weight of dynastic desperation. Occasionally, though, someone surprises you. A suitor who doesn't follow the script, who asks what you want, who listens instead of performing. These are rare, fleeting anomalies, quickly silenced or sidelined by advisors who scoff at emotion as weakness. But they remind you of something dangerous, that you're not just a bargaining chip. You're a person, with wants, with dreams. And though those dreams are inconvenient to the crown, they're persistent. You might daydream about fleeing with the stable boy who sees you as more than a pawn, or imagine an elopement to a seaside town where your name means nothing and no one bows. These dreams are dangerous, not because they're impossible, but because they feel real. They give you hope, and hope, in a royal court, is more subversive than rebellion. Meanwhile, the suitors grow bolder. Those who fail to win your favor often lash out. Some with cutting words meant to bruise your reputation, others with reckless alliances forged in spite. You learn to protect yourself, not just from heartbreak, but from humiliation. Your smile becomes armor, your silence a weapon. You learn to deflect unwanted attention with grace and deflate overconfidence with a single raised eyebrow. And still, they keep coming, drawn not to you, but to what you represent: power, prestige, a future tethered to history. The longer you resist, the more they press. You are told it is your duty, that your heart belongs not to yourself, but to your house, your country, your legacy. But deep down, you begin to question who benefits from your union? Who gains the most when you lose your autonomy? And when will anyone ask what you want, truly, without expectation? For many royals, the menagerie becomes their prison. The longer the list of suitors grows, the narrower their options feel. Marry now, or be declared unfit. Choose poorly, or risk exile. Some escape through scandal, arranged indiscretions that force a marriage out of necessity, allowing them to at least control who they fall with, if not for. Others manipulate the system, stringing suitors along to gain time, pitting families against each other in a subtle war of attrition. A few disappear altogether. Whispers of secret weddings, hidden pregnancies, mysterious illnesses that conveniently remove them from the spotlight. And some, perhaps most tragically, simply surrender. They smile, say yes, and live the rest of their days beside someone they barely tolerate, crafting a public fairy tale to mask a private void. But even then, not all is lost. Within the cold mechanics of royal matchmaking, there are still flickers of connection. Some unions of duty evolve into partnerships of mutual respect. Some arranged marriages find a strange, sturdy love and shared responsibility. And even in the worst pairings, there remains the possibility of private joy, affairs of the heart conducted in secret, friendships formed in shadow, personal victories carved from the stone of obligation. Because no matter how many suitors crowd the palace gates, how many treaties hinge on your hand, the soul cannot be entirely erased by politics. And perhaps that is the final truth of the royal menagerie, that beneath the crowns and courtships, beneath the rehearsed charm and strategic seductions, every suitor, every royal, every weary heart in the palace is simply searching for connection, for freedom, for the impossible dream that love might survive, even here. The day of a coronation is meant to be the pinnacle of royal destiny, a crescendo of ceremony, sacred oil, and thunderous applause. But for you, it begins with a rib-crushing corset, 3 intrusive attendants, and a haunting sense that your body is no longer your own. Before the sun even considers rising, you're yanked from sleep by the same flurry of hands that have been dressing you like a decorative cake for years. But today they move with reverent panic, adjusting, lacing, tightening, retightening, as if the very threads of your bodice are responsible for holding the monarchy together. The corset, stitched by royal command, bone stiffened with whalebone and regret, feels less like fabric and more like a punishment. Every breath is a negotiation, every movement a reminder that ceremony, in this palace, often means suffering disguised as tradition. The garments go on in layers, each more ornate and absurd than the last. Gowns embroidered with symbols you're supposed to understand, capes so long they drag your dignity behind you, shoes so narrow they might have been made for a myth instead of a mortal. Your skin is powdered pale. Your hair is pulled tight into a design that would make a cathedral jealous. And beneath it all, your heart pounds. Not with joy, but with the pressure of expectation, the weight of 1,000 eyes, and the knowledge that every gesture from this day forward will be examined, recorded, and canonized or criticized in equal measure. Coronations are not for the crowd. They are for the watchers, the whisperers, the chroniclers. You are less a person today than a symbol etched into history's marble tablet, whether you like it or not. The rituals begin long before the actual crowning. Days of purification, fasting, quiet reflection, and symbolic nonsense where even your silence is rehearsed. You're bathed in rose water blessed by a priest whose name you don't remember. You kneel before relics that may or may not be real. You are taught how to accept an anointing without flinching, how to gaze skyward at just the right angle for painters to immortalize your submission, how to not sneeze when the incense clouds make your nose itch like mad. The entire kingdom turns its gaze upon you, not as a human ascending, but as an idea, as divine right in a dress. The high priest mumbles prayers over your head, drips oil behind your ears, and for a moment, you wonder if he's just baptized your ability to choose. They call it sacred, but it feels more like surrender. As you process into the cathedral, every step echoes with centuries of expectation. You're surrounded by bishops, courtiers, nobles, and foreign dignitaries who have no idea what you're thinking, only that you must look dignified while thinking it. The crown is carried ahead of you like a relic of a bygone war, perched on a velvet pillow like some holy weapon. And when it is finally placed on your head, heavy and cold and too large for your skull, it feels not like triumph, but like burden. The gems glint under candlelight, but they're sparkle blinds rather than dazzles. You can barely lift your neck. Your spine protests. The corset cinches tighter. Your body screams beneath the silence. You hear the crowd cheer, your subjects shouting your name with joy and duty, but you feel impossibly small, like a girl playing dress-up in the crumbling remains of something older than herself. They say power feels intoxicating, but all you feel is pressure, pain, and the creeping fear that you're not becoming something greater. You are being absorbed into something you'll never fully understand. And of course, the superstitions come clattering behind the procession like loose stones. Every royal family has its curses, whispers that plague every coronation, lingering like bad omens tucked between prayer books and silk banners. Perhaps someone muttered about the cursed jewel in your scepter, stolen generations ago, and said to bring misfortune to any woman who wields it. Maybe there's a tale of a ghostly figure who always appears in the rafters of the chapel during the ceremony, signaling an untimely death. Or perhaps, more personally, there's the family legacy of fragile queens, women who smiled through coronations only to fall ill within a year, as if the throne itself rejected their presence. The palace won't acknowledge these rumors officially, of course, too undignified, too irrational, but the staff talk. You hear it in the way they touch your hand before the ceremony, a second too long like a goodbye. You see in the nervous flicker of a bishop's eyes as he reads your name. Historians still wonder if one queen hundreds of years ago really did go mad after a coronation, muttering about eyes in the mirror and blood in her wine. You wonder, as the golden orb is placed in your gloved hands, if you're next. The coronation ends eventually, but the crown stays. Figuratively, if not physically. Even once you're back in your chambers, surrounded by fading incense and aching bones, the weight remains. Every letter now must carry a new seal. Every decision is scrutinized for wisdom, grace, or weakness. Your meals are larger, your audience requests never-ending, your solitude completely vanished. You are no longer a daughter, or a bride-to-be, or a decoration to parade. You are sovereign, or at least the feminine facsimile of one. And though the robes have been hung, and the corset unlaced, and the crown stored back in its velvet box, you feel none of the freedom those removals should bring. If anything, you feel more confined, because now the world sees you as complete, finished, fulfilled. But you know better. You know that inside this glorified costume, this ceremonial identity, there is still a heartbeat out of rhythm with the role. You are expected to wield power with elegance, to lead with grace, to age with beauty, to never crack. But power, especially when bestowed in spectacle, is a brittle thing. And somewhere deep down, you suspect that all the pomp and pageantry isn't meant to elevate you, but to distract you, to convince you that the cage is beautiful, and that beauty makes it bearable. At night, alone, you trace the bruises left by the corset and wonder why they're not considered part of the ceremony. You think of how much easier it is for the kings. Their regalia is heavy, yes, but not suffocating. Their odes come with authority, not second-guessing. They are raised to rule. You were raised to adorn, and only now, with a crown weighing down your hairline and centuries pressing against your shoulders, are you expected to transform into something you were never allowed to become. You can't help but laugh, a small, bitter sound in the echoing silence of your chamber, because the coronation is supposed to be your arrival, your power, your beginning, but it feels like an ending, not of your life, but of your ownership of it. It starts with a cough, or maybe a cold sweat, a faint dizziness when standing too quickly. But in a palace where every breath is measured and every expression judged, you dare not speak of it aloud, lest the rumor of your weakness outpaces your actual decline. Illness in the royal world is both feared and exploited, a contradiction you quickly learn to navigate with trembling hands and a forced smile. You're ushered into silence and shadow the moment you look pale under candlelight. A royal's body is sacred, and sacred bodies are not supposed to decay. But yours is faltering. The physicians, with their powdered wigs and herbal tinctures, swarm around you like vultures masquerading as doves, offering syrups brewed from crushed pearls and dried violets, leech therapy, and prayers written in Latin. They debate over your symptoms in whispers, never daring to speak plainly in your presence, as if truth might make you sicker. One declares it consumption, another says melancholia, a third blames your corset, your womb, the way your soul sits inside your ribs. And yet, none can cure you. You're moved to a colder wing of the palace, one with tall windows that let in too much moonlight and not enough sun. You become a portrait, still, pale, propped up in silk-covered chairs for brief moments of fresh air before you're returned to bed like a fragile relic. Visitors come in hushed procession, dressed in pity. They sit at your bedside, speaking about weather and diplomacy while avoiding your eyes, because no one wants to admit what they see in them, a fading light behind the royal veneer. The worst part is not the pain, it is the isolation. Illness turns you into a ghost before death ever dares to arrive. Servants handle you with gloves. Your own handmaids begin to rotate out, fearing contagion or scandal. Even your family grows scarce, sending letters instead of visits, praising your bravery while distancing themselves from your decline. A sick princess is a political inconvenience, a fragile chess piece that cannot move but must still remain upright. You begin to notice your belongings disappearing from your chamber, removed slowly and deliberately. Gowns that will no longer fit, slippers you're too weak to wear, mirrors that no longer reflect beauty, only frailty. One by one, your symbols of status are packed away. Even your name, once whispered with reverence, becomes a footnote in court gossip, spoken with phrases like a shame or such promise. The silence grows heavy, pierced only by the rustling of your chambermaid's skirts and the distant toll of church bells, which begin to sound more like countdowns than celebrations. Your world shrinks to the confines of the bed, the curtains around it, and the pages of the religious texts placed by your pillow. You don't remember asking for them. They just appeared, perhaps to keep your soul distracted while your body faltered. And as your days blur into one another, marked by tinctures, chills, and fits of half-sleep, you begin to invent company. Not out of madness, but necessity. A young woman with a lamb appears in your dreams and stays there, every night, whispering comfort in a tongue you don't understand. She smells of lavender and ash. A boy in ragged clothes prays at the foot of your bed, tears streaking down his soot-covered face, muttering your name as if you're the one meant to save him. You don't know if they're memories or visions, but they feel real enough to clutch when the loneliness claws at your throat. You call them your saints, conjured companions born from fever and faith. You name them yourself: Saint Silence, Saint Mercy, Saint Unseen. You begin speaking to them during the night, pressing your fingers together in mimicry of prayer, asking questions the clergy never dare to answer. Why must royal daughters suffer? Why are the sick locked away, while the sins of the powerful are paraded through golden halls? Why is your suffering treated as divine proof of character rather than a call for compassion? No real priest replies, but your invented saints do. In dreams, in thoughts, in flickers of candlelight. They offer you peace no sermon ever has. The palace, of course, feeds off illusion, and your illness becomes another story for it to wear like perfume. Word spreads through the court that you have turned inward in devotion, that you're no longer merely a princess, but a holy figure in waiting. The queen whispers that God has touched you with a trial to prepare your soul. Pain is recast as purity. The isolation you endure is praised as saintly reflection. Courtiers begin to attribute miracles to your name. A blind maid claims she regained her sight after brushing your bed sheets. A dying hound licked your hand and rose the next morning, barking. It doesn't matter that none of these are true. They want you holy, not because they believe in your divinity, but because a sainted princess is easier to celebrate than a dying one. You overhear talk of posthumous canonization, of gilded shrines, of tiny bones wrapped in velvet being sent to cathedrals as relics. Your life becomes less about healing and more about legacy, an ending rewritten before it even arrives. The church begins drafting hagiographies, romanticizing your every step since birth, weaving fabricated humility into a tapestry of martyrdom. The girl who once danced barefoot in forbidden halls now becomes the virgin of velvet, the wounded dove, the light beneath the crown. You want to scream, to break the spell of these lies, but your lungs cannot bear the effort. And so the narrative blooms without you, cultivated by men who never heard your voice beyond the echo of a cough. There are moments of rebellion, even still. On particularly lucid days, you rip the saint card from your bedside table and scribble on them. Tiny messages in a trembling hand. I am not a miracle. My pain is not sacred. Let me be forgotten, not fabricated. You hide them beneath cushions, inside books, anywhere a future girl might find them and know you were real. Not a statue, not a legend, but a breathing girl who wanted to live. Your invented saints remain loyal, their presence felt in the flicker of shadows or the calm that settles just before dawn. You draw them with charcoal stolen from the fireplace. Images of eyes and halos, hands reaching out of darkness, a girl surrounded by smoke who still smiles. These saints don't demand prayer. They offer witness. They remind you that even in your erasure, you resist simply by remembering who you are. As weeks turn into months, your body weakens further. You're spoon-fed like a child. Your skin becomes translucent. You overhear the phrase "last rites," spoken once, quickly, then never again. But it lingers. A cleric is summoned, more for appearance than salvation. He recites the usual rites in a bored tone, clearly disappointed by the lack of audience. You close your eyes and imagine your invented saints standing behind him, arms crossed, unimpressed. You don't want a death with bells and banners. You want silence, dignity, maybe the scent of lavender. On your final night, or what you believe might be, you ask for nothing. No priest, no family, just the open window, the stars, the cool air that smells of snow. You whisper one last prayer, not to the God of men, but to the saints you made in your own image. Don't let them forget that I lived, not just that I died. In the morning, you are still alive, barely. And perhaps that too is a miracle, but no one writes it down. Love in the royal courts is not a feeling. It's a performance, a negotiation, a trap gilded in lace and sealed with a wax crest. As a royal, you are taught early that affection is dangerous, that desire is a luxury reserved for poets and peasants, not for daughters of the crown. You learn it first from your governess, who pinches your cheeks and tells you fairy tales of noblemen rescuing princesses, but always with a note of irony, as if to say, this will never be you. Then, as you grow, the stories shift. Now, the prince isn't charming. He's strategic. He owns land your father wants. He has a fleet of ships. He has no known mistresses. That's as close to romantic as it gets. You're trained to spot a suitable match by the cut of his coat and the weight of his lineage, not by the way he looks at you or the way your stomach flutters when he smiles. Courtly love is a delicate, dangerous dance of glances and gossip, of coded letters and garden strolls that must never exceed 15 minutes, lest tongues wag and reputations unravel. But beneath the layers of etiquette and embroidered lies, you still feel something, a flicker, a longing, a rebellion in your chest that says, surely, this cannot be all there is. You fall in love anyway once, maybe with a guard, or a tutor, or a musician who teaches you the lyre and never looks directly at you unless you're laughing. It's stupid and dangerous and entirely yours. You steal moments like a criminal, brief touches when hands graze over books, smiles that say more than words ever could. You carve your names into the underside of your writing desk. You meet in forgotten corners of the palace, behind drapery, in the orangery, beneath the chapel stairs. There's never a kiss, never a confession. Just the ache, just the hope that one day you'll run, that he'll take you away from all this, that he'll look at you like a girl, not a pawn. But then, one day he disappears, reassigned, dismissed, or worse, executed under vague charges of indecency. You're told nothing. No one looks you in the eye for days. And so you return to the palace of mirrors, of masks, of cold suitors and colder contracts. You smile at the next duke presented to you. He's twice your age and smells like spoiled meat, but he owns vineyards and your country needs wine. Your marriage is arranged in ink long before it is consummated in flesh. On paper, it's perfect. Two dynasties united, peace sealed with a kiss that tastes like dust. The wedding itself is a spectacle. Flowers flown in from foreign shores, choirs imported, crowds bribed to cheer. You wear white because tradition demands it, even though you bled months ago when your innocence was stolen by circumstance or power or simply a hand that didn't ask first. No one cares. What matters is that you look pure, that the veil is heavy enough to hide the truth. On the altar, your new husband lifts it and sees the face of a stranger. He doesn't smile. He doesn't have to. The ceremony proceeds, full of hollow words and sacred promises broken before they're even spoken. That night, you're paraded to the bridal chamber, your hair let down like a curtain before a stage. The audience waits outside, listening for proof that the kingdom's newest alliance has been sealed. You lie there, staring at the ceiling, counting cracks, and wishing to be anyone else, anywhere else. Love has nothing to do with it, and yet you still crave it. You search for it in letters from old friends, in stories the handmaidens whisper late at night about queens who fell in love after marriage, or in spite of it. You begin to fantasize not about princes, but about merchants with kind eyes and laughter in their teeth, about stable boys who speak little and listen well, about widowed seamstresses who write poetry no one reads. You imagine slipping away into a life where your name means nothing, where your heart isn't currency. But you are royal. You can't even open a window without permission, let alone your own heart. Instead, you write letters you never send, poems you burn, and lullabies no one will ever hear. You pretend the way your husband touches you doesn't make your skin crawl. You endure the pregnancies, the miscarriages, the silent dinners, and louder silences that follow. You produce heirs like duty demands, each child a mix of your blood and someone else's ambition. And still, they praise you. They call you devoted, dutiful, dignified. Never do they say loved. But love continues to haunt the palace, hiding in forbidden corridors and moonlit gardens. You see it in the way two handmaidens brush fingers when passing each other, in the stammer of a clerk too long in the presence of a blushing scribe. You envy them, not because they have more, but because they have less to lose. Their love may be forbidden, but at least it is theirs. Yours was taken, twisted, traded. At balls, you see young girls with stars in their eyes and wish you could warn them. Don't look at him like that. You want to say, he'll take that look and crush it. He'll call it loyalty, then punish you for it. But you smile instead. You dance. You play your part. Some days, the loneliness is so loud it drowns out the music. You retreat to the chapel, not for prayer, but for privacy. You sit in the pews, staring at the stained glass, wondering if any saint ever fell in love. Did they weep for the lives they never lived? Did they ever regret being chosen? Did they ever beg to be forgotten? Your tears come hot and fast, and the echo of them against the stone feels like a confession. But no one hears you. No one ever does. The court sees only what it wants. A smiling queen, a content consort, a porcelain doll who never cracks. But behind the mask, you begin to rot. And then, one day, a letter arrives. Not from a suitor or a diplomat, but from a stranger who writes, "I saw you once, and you looked sad." It's unsigned. It should be burned. Instead, you read it again, and again, and again. Someone saw you. Not your crown, not your title. You. The letters keep coming, carefully worded, never inappropriate, just kind. They tell you about the way the gardens look at dawn, about the stars over the western wing, about the way your smile, your real one, lit up a hallway once. You don't respond. You can't, but you treasure them. Hide them in a book of sermons you never open. You memorize every word. You cling to them like a lifeline, not because you love the stranger, but because they remind you that you still exist beneath the crown. Years pass. Your husband grows old and cruel, or maybe just tired. Your children grow into strangers shaped by the same machine that devoured you. Your body changes. You find new wrinkles, new aches, new reasons to avoid mirrors. But your heart, your traitorous, stubborn heart, still dreams of a different life, of a quiet cottage, of music, of a name spoken without duty weighing behind it. You never find out who wrote the letters. Maybe it was a maid, a guard, a ghost. Maybe it was no one. But they saved you in a way no prince ever could. In the end, you are remembered as wise, graceful, just. The kingdom mourns you with fanfare and flowers. But in some dusty corner of the palace, behind a loose brick, a stack of old letters remains. Ink faded, pages worn, but still legible. Proof that you lived, that you loved. That love, no matter how forbidden or fleeting, still found its way to you. Even the place where love was never meant to survive. A throne gleams like salvation from afar, majestic, imposing, reverent. But as you approach, its surface distorts into something less divine and more damning. A monument not to power, but to sacrifice. They tell you the throne is the seat of ultimate control, that once you ascend it, you wield authority over nations, lives, legacies. But what they don't tell you is that the throne is more prison than pedestal, and your supposed choice to sit upon it is as fabricated as the stories embroidered on royal tapestries. From birth, your life is engineered around this gilded chair. Every step, smile, and syllable molded to fit the narrative that your ascension is destiny, that your bloodline has earned this burden. But you know better. You've seen too many choices made behind closed doors, too many council meetings where your name is passed around like currency, Too many whispers that end with nods and signatures before you're even in the room. Choice, in this world, is a story you're told to keep you compliant, to make the chains seem ornamental. As a royal, your agency is cosmetic, your freedom theatrical. When the time comes for you to decide whether to take the throne, they present it as a moment of gravitas, your hand poised above a crown, your eyes full of false deliberation. They wait, breathless, for your answer. But you're not a fool. You already said yes the moment you were born. The moment they pierced your ears with gold, braided your hair into coronation patterns before you could walk, placed tiny scepters in your crib as if your fingers hadn't been meant for touch, but for rule. The throne room itself is cold. Not physically, though the stone walls rarely hold heat, but spiritually. It's too large, designed to dwarf you. The echoes are purposeful, engineered to remind you that your words, however eloquent, are always swallowed by the institution. You sit not to speak, but to be spoken through. You begin to realize that the throne is not a seat, it's a mask, one you cannot remove, not even in the privacy of your own thoughts. Because even your mind is not entirely your own anymore. It has been colonized by expectation, shaped by advisors and ancestors and legends so thick with mythology you no longer know where they end and you begin. Your desires are irrelevant. You wanted to write music or paint or ride horses until your legs gave out. But those desires were amputated over time. First gently, then ruthlessly, until only duty remained. And that duty is laced with performance. Every breath must be calculated, every expression measured. You smile not out of joy, but out of necessity. You listen not to understand, but to assess, to manipulate, to rule. People bow to you not because they love you, but because they fear the absence of you. The throne makes you sacred, but only in the way relics are sacred, untouchable, ossified, tragic. And then there's the myth of benevolence, of righteous rule, of divine right. You're told that your ancestors were chosen by gods, that your bloodline is ordained, that sitting on the throne links you to heaven itself. But when you stare into the mirror, you see no deity. You see a weary young woman with eyes that have cried behind velvet curtains, a girl who was denied affection, who grew up watched but never seen. You remember the coronation, the crown so heavy it bruised your scalp, the robes so cumbersome you nearly fell. Everyone clapped. No one noticed the blood on your heel. You think of the myths they will write about you. How wise you were, how graceful, how you brought prosperity. They won't write about the nights you screamed into pillows, the treaties you signed that broke your heart, the marriages you arranged that destroyed others. The myth is always more palatable than the truth, and so you will become myth. Not a woman, not a person, a story, a symbol, a statue cast in bronze with lies etched into its base. And what a choice. If you had said no, if you had refused a crown, fled the palace, started a life elsewhere, what then? You've asked yourself that 1,000 times. But every time you try to imagine it, you hit a wall. Because you've never been taught how to exist without the throne. There is no language for your identity beyond it. You were never given the tools to live freely, only to rule dutifully. Yet despite it all, you wonder. You wonder what it would feel like to make one true choice. Not a royal decree, not a diplomatic gesture, not a symbolic nod. A real choice. To leave, to love, to scream, to stop. To walk barefoot across wet grass without guards surrounding you, without eyes judging your every movement. You imagine shedding the crown and becoming anonymous. Would your body feel lighter? Would your breath come easier? Would the world finally see you not as a sovereign, but as someone who once longed for simplicity? You'll never know. The myth is too strong, too deep, too entwined with the fate of too many others. To reject the throne is to unravel the nation, So instead, you sit, you rule, you speak in riddles and decrees. You host banquets and bless armies. You become the thing they need, even if it kills the thing you are. And yet, there are moments, fleeting, fragile, but real, when you lock eyes with a stable hand and see no fear. When a child tugs on your robe and calls you lady instead of your majesty. When you laugh, not because it's expected, but because something genuinely tickled your ribs. In those moments, you remember that you are still in there, buried under centuries of expectation. The throne may have shaped you, but it has not erased you. Not yet. You write your own myths in the margins of official records, scribbled notes about how the soup tasted or how your youngest child told a joke that made you snort. You hide letters in hollowed books, tuck songs between treaties, small rebellions, quiet proofs of life. And maybe, just maybe, someone will find them centuries later and realize that the queen was not a statue, that she laughed, that she cried, that she once dreamed of love and freedom and choice. In the end, they'll remember you as they choose, perhaps as the monarch who brought peace, or the tyrant who ruled too long, or the saint who never smiled. They won't ask what you wanted. They won't care that your choices were crafted for you long before you were old enough to spell your name. But you will know, and in your final days, as you sit once more on the throne that was never yours to refuse, you will smile. Not for the myth, not for the court, but for yourself. Because deep inside the golden cage, you kept a single truth burning, that you were more than the crown, more than the chair, more than the myth they forced upon you. You were a girl once, and she mattered. Even if the world forgot, you didn't. You've made it through the tangled halls of power, past the velvet lies and whispered betrayals, through jeweled corridors and candlelit nights heavy with expectation. The journey has been long and layered, filled with silken masks and silent sacrifices. But now we slow everything down. The world of thrones and myths begins to blur at the edges, softening like the glow of a dying fire. The voices of the court fade into silence. The weight of crowns, corsets, and consequence slips gently from your shoulders. You're no longer the heir, the ruler, the sacrifice. You are simply here in this moment where nothing more is expected of you. Feel the hush settle in like a warm blanket. There is no performance now, no duty left undone. You've given all you had to give. Let your breath come slower, longer, deeper. Inhale peace. Exhale the past. Let your mind loosen its grip and unfurl like a flag at rest. No longer caught in a storm. You are safe. You are held. You are home. Picture a quiet meadow under moonlight, the air cool and still, with only the gentle rustle of leaves overhead and the distant hum of crickets singing to the stars. A silver mist curls at your feet, not threatening but tender, like the dreams beginning to rise around you. The sky is vast and endless above, and you, finally, are small enough to simply exist within it. Not as a ruler, not as a symbol, but as someone who deserves rest, softness, and stillness. The throne is far behind, the noise has ceased, the world is quiet now. And so are you. You've earned this peace.